The Jets sure love to make things interesting right before the start of the playoffs. Neal Pionk is signed for the foreseeable future. Let's chat about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, yesterday we had our season preview and, or not really the season preview, but the playoff preview between the Blues and Jets. If you missed that episode, Haley Taylor Simon from Locked On Blues joined us for a great back and forth, kind of what to expect on the up to 7-game series here of the opening round. We both expected that the series is not going to last that long, but for more specifics on players to watch and stuff, be sure to check out that episode. Naturally, of course, I would have recorded that right before the Jets announced that Neal Pionk has been extended for 6 years. So that has a major organizational ramification. The deal itself, I've got a lot of thoughts about, and I want to get into it in a brief moment because I think that there's many layers to this contract that are worth kind of walking through. But before we do, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, the Neal Pionk contract, let's talk about it, right? I'll be completely upfront. Let's preface this. I was not really on board with the idea of extending Neal. I like him as a leader, and I think as a person, he's a great fit for the team. Organizationally, I know he loves playing in Winnipeg. He is very committed to this team. And if we're talking about players who I think have always been accountable, Neal is usually one of those guys who I think is very upfront about where he thinks he's done well, where he has felt he has struggled. And so I respect that a lot. That said, I think Pionk, the player, has really been up and down over the years. And, this season, obviously in a contract year, he's playing very well. But I think you look at why he's been doing really well this year, and it really comes down to him and Sandberg working extremely well together. They are, in some ways, more than the sum of their parts, and I think that that's where, a lot of Pionk's success is really derived from is Sandberg is an elite defender, and Pionk is more allowed to express himself freely on the ice and become sort of a roaming attacking blue liner rather than just a guy who has traditionally been a more second pairing player. When they're together, they just have really good chemistry. They play, a really good, fast, aggressive style, and you really don't see a lot of mistakes from either player. That doesn't mean that they won't happen. And sometimes, whether it's Sandberg or more frequently Pionk and the DZ, they might miss an assignment. They are generally a really dominant pairing. And so it makes sense as to why the Jets, I think, were looking at Neal and also kind of gauging the market and realizing that Pionk was going to get a lot of money from a team, right? The right side of D market is very talent deficient right now. There weren't really going to be many UFAs hitting market that were worth signing. And so the Jets looked at this guy and thought, we can't really let him go. We don't have an internal replacement, and Salamans is not ready yet. They might not even envision him taking on an NHL role for some time. So Pionk, I think that they put as a pretty high priority to get him locked up. Now, where I maybe had some reservations is that, they're paying him $7 million per season now, which compared to the rise in next year's cap and probably subsequent rises, it's not going to be that big of a raise proportionally speaking. In fact, it's going to be pretty close to what he's making now. But I just think that by the time his contract is over, he'll be in his late 30s. And, it's a lot of money. And I think you look at how he's achieved his success, and it is fair to question whether that money might have been better spent looking at a different positional upgrade, right? The Jets have guys like Miller, Shen, DeMello, they've got a fair few right-sided D. Even Coughlin could potentially stick around. So they've got a lot of guys on the right side who could probably do a pretty good job. Whether they would ever get the chance to do that now, it's a bit moot. So for me, this contract incurs a fair bit of risk. Usually, once you start hitting into your early to mid 30s, the decline can happen very quickly. And I think we've seen Pionk, some of his performances, especially away from Sandberg, have indicated that the decline is happening now. And so whether he can kind of keep up this level of performance along Sandberg is a bit of a question mark. And you also have to hope that Sandberg himself stays healthy. We saw what this team was like when Dylan went down, and we also saw what Pionk was like when he wasn't with Sandberg. And so it's just not the same kind of performance. So, yeah, I don't love this contract. I will say a couple of interesting things, though. The first is that the first 3 seasons, he's got a 15-team no-trade clause. After year 3, that then becomes a 10-team no-trade clause. And so I look at this as, for one thing, absolutely fascinating that you've got a Jets player now who has actually built a no-trade clause into his extension. We don't ever really see that. And that really shows a level of commitment to the Jets and not really wanting to go anywhere that Pionk is demonstrating. But I also think that the timing of his no-trade clause and when it shrinks probably gives you a sense of when, at that point, after 3 years, the Jets may be re-examining their defensive core, right? That might be the rough timeline that they think Salamonson might be ready to take on a full-time NHL role. So that, I think that there's a lot to work with here. Salamonson probably will start to get some third pairing minutes in the next 2-ish seasons. And then, maybe 3 to 4 years down the road, we're starting to look at him alongside Sandberg or somebody else. So there, I think, is some way to look at this deal. I don't think Pionk is going to be finishing his contract as a Jet necessarily, at least not through the full 6 years, right? We are probably going to see some sort of either a trade or a buyout at some point. And I think that that's kind of baked into some of the terms of the contract here. Now, again, will this hurt Winnipeg? I don't know. The Jets still have plenty of cap space. I don't think it's going to really impact their ability to get Velarde and Ehlers dealt with. I'm still sort of not really figuring Ehlers into Winnipeg's future, but maybe that changes. But in the meantime, right, obviously the Jets also have the Connor and Perfetti deals coming up in the near future. So there is a lot of money to spend, and there is a lot of money that's going to have to be locked into some really key players. And so that's why I was kind of like not as in love with the Pionk deal. But I get it. And I think, if you're looking for a really positive spin, I think it's also another pushback against the narrative that people don't want to be in Winnipeg. You are getting Iafallo signed, Niederreiter signed, Helly and Scheifele, Pionk locked up. I mean, all of these players want to commit here, and I think that that is a very big testament to the organizational and cultural change that the Jets have instituted over the past couple of seasons. So, yes, on the performance and player side, I do have some major questions. But in terms of the contract structure and the messaging it sends, it is more positive in that respect. Also of note, Pionk is getting a fair bit of bonus money up front, which the Jets almost never do. So if that is a new change and it's a way to incentivize locking in players for the long term, that is a very positive change. You can argue whether you would want that being used on a player like Pionk, but I think the bigger thing is the Jets maybe are starting to learn from some of the mistakes of how they've done negotiations in the past. And so I'm hopeful that going forward, Winnipeg is a little more thoughtful about how they're building their contracts and how they are trying to get guys to commit here. I think if that is a thing that they are really starting to reinforce and adopt, that is a positive change for the future. So a lot of thoughts, some good. It comes with some drawbacks, but I think overall, the Pionk contract will probably be fine. We'll see, right? It could age poorly very quickly. I'm hopeful that it doesn't. Just really cross your fingers that Sandberg stays healthy. But amidst all of that, obviously Pionk is about to play a major role in this playoff series alongside Sandberg. Hopefully, a very positive one. We'll chat about some of the early line rushes ahead of Game 1 tomorrow. But before we do, did want to shout out our friends and partners at Amazon. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With Wi-Fi 6 and auto low latency mode advanced technology, Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning fast speeds you need to stay competitive. And of course, it already comes with your usual entertainment suite, whether you're into 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. It is a complete package, and now you add gaming to it. As somebody who plays FC25, obviously the Fire TV Stick 4K is super convenient. It allows you to game on the go, and you don't even have to have the full Xbox with you. So it's fast, responsive, and affordable. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting about early line rushes for the Jets. Obviously, game one is tomorrow. Going to be a very good time. I was doing some skips around the kitchen today. I think I just have all the nervous energy. I think we're all probably pretty excited. Even with some questionable lineup choices, I still think that this team is going to be very tough to beat for the Blues, right? I think the Jets are prepared for the postseason. This team is locked in, and they've already proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that even with injury crises, this team is starting to really commit to elite levels of defensive play. And I think that has a tremendous impact on this team's ability to, play playoff hockey, right? This is the kind of 5v5 play I have been waiting for the whole year. And for the last month and a half, they have really turned on the Jets, pun intended. So up front, obviously, Connor Scheifele and Iafallo are sticking together. This line has been so good lately. I really hope that they just keep it. I know that Velarde traditionally gets the look up top, but with how this team is built and how the CSI line has really started to dominate the forecheck and own offensive zone possession, it just makes everything better for your bottom lines, right? Everyone after can feed off that zone possession, the ability to roll those lines. It's just better this way. The second line, Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, and Perfetti. Obviously, this is usually Ehlers in Niederreiter's spot. Niederreiter and Perfetti have been finding each other a fair few number of chances. Nemesnikov also got in on the opportunities last game, just had a huge highway robbery from Husso that I think, was very frustrating and probably could have resulted in a Nemesnikov goal. But, I think that this line is at least doing some better stuff lately. I still have some questions about the longevity of it, but at least for the interim, it's fine. Tanev, Lowry, Appleton, your third line. Tanev and Lowry have been okay. Appleton, I've been a little frustrated with. He's had a couple of looks, but overall, I continue to see those inconsistencies and issues with him that we've kind of become accustomed to with some of his games. So not ideal. Tanev, I think, has also had some issues, not so much in sort of the defensive impact and, the forecheck, but kind of making the right passes, being in a good position to receive. Sometimes, he does have some simplicity in his game that maybe does impact his ability to be a higher offensive forward, right? He's very fire and forget, very direct, and sometimes I do think that maybe works a little bit against the overall playmaking ability. Now, the fourth line, you just never have questions with. Gus, Barron, Jad, these three have been rolling over opponents. You don't even sweat about it. So very impressive. Happy to see them continue to cook. Barron as the 4C, yeah, he's pretty locked in. Really makes you wonder if he's primed for a middle six role next year. So something to keep an eye out for. On defense, Morrissey, DeMello, Sandberg, Pionk, as we were talking about, and Stanley Shen. Now, the third pairing is going to be an issue. How much of an issue it is in this first series is debatable. obviously, as long as the play stays in front of them, it's less of a problem. But if those guys start to see either the Blues or any future opponents get behind them, it's going to be a bigger issue. And, I just don't quite understand why Miller doesn't have a stronger rep with this team. Uh, he's got his issues and he has certain flaws. But if we're looking at the mobility and what I think a Shen Miller pairing could do for the third unit, I I just don't really understand the desire to have the slowest pairing possible on your third. Again, I know it's a size bias thing, and I think that there's the thought of size being the biggest determinant here for their defensive value. But more often than not, the skating speed is going to be a significant problem. Even against bad teams, if they're fast and they can get the inside step on you, it can lead to some serious issues. So, hoping it's not going to be a problem in this series. I don't anticipate it coming up much, but it's just something to keep an eye on. And if that pairing really does struggle, I wonder if Arniel maybe thinks about a change at some point. But crossing fingers, it doesn't really get to that point because if they're standing out very publicly and you're noticing it, that could be a bigger concern. Now, on the Blues side, at practice today, what we saw was neighbors Thomas Buchnevich, Snuggerud, Shen and Kairu, Joseph, Sunkvist, and Bolduk, and then Toropchenko, Foxa, and Walker. On defense, we've got Fowler and Pareko, Broberg and Falk, and Suter Letty. What's interesting about the top six is that Kairu and Thomas have officially been separated briefly. I don't know if this is going to continue. My imagination here is that, I think Montgomery's trying to spread the wealth out. He knows that this Jets team is really hard to break down, especially at 5v5. And so, Kairu and Thomas together have been absolutely electric. You've got Snuggerud looking pretty good. First couple of NHL games looking fairly legit. Neighbors, obviously, a pretty solid top sixer himself. So I think the expectation is to try and build a top nine that can compete with what the Jets have. And even injured, the Jets are just so tight defensively that it's very hard to generate chances. Winnipeg is top three in high danger chances against in the slot, and they have become one of the most elite and defensively stingiest teams of the last month. So the Blues really do have an uphill battle here, and I think that they're looking at this as a game where it's not going to be fast. They're going to have to try and survive Winnipeg's waves of pressure, and if they can get the top nine to work the way that I think they're imagining it to, they stand a better chance of extending this series by a couple of games. But again, given how the Jets have played and how Winnipeg is built, this is going to be a very tough series for St. Louis. And it's partly because their defense has an even bigger series of issues, right? Fowler and Pareko as your top pairing is not ideal. Pareko's played better lately, and I think Fowler has tried to really step up. But this is a scenario where you don't really have a lot of margin for error. There's not an opportunity where if you start to really see struggles and issues with the back end that you have easy replacements. Falk, hasn't really played super well the last several games. Broberg is still great, and I think that they really envision him to be one of their top performers going forward, but he can only carry so much if Falk is really struggling to make the right decisions, especially under pressure. And what I kind of said about Stanley Shen also does apply a bit to Suter Letty. They're slow, they're not fast, and if opponents get the step on them, it is going to be a bigger issue for that third pairing. So, for the Jets, I think that they're feeling pretty good about this. There's no Dylan Holloway right now, so that is a huge loss for the Blues. Holloway may come back later, either in the series or if they survive, maybe the next round. But I think we all are expecting and really predicting the Jets here to try and come through with a big series win. I will be curious to see how long Montgomery sticks with these line combinations. The Jets, I think, are going to put enough pressure early on that, the first game or two, I do think go to the Jets. And I think it's going to necessitate Montgomery getting very flexible, which is actually not great for the Jets. Montgomery, I feel, is still one of the best coaches in this round of 16 right now. So keep an eye out for that. But Arniel has certainly proven that he's not, unwilling to make changes himself. So hopefully, as Winnipeg continues to really get prepared for this postseason run and starts to put themselves in a better position for some big success in this playoff series, that we see, if needed, some changes. Hoping the Jets just come out swinging and dominating to begin with, and that it's not even a concern then. But you never know, right? The playoffs are a different time. Strange things can happen in short series runs, and so let's just hope that there's no drama and that the Jets make it through relatively unhindered and get some rest ahead of what will be a very tough second round should the Jets advance. But of course, uh, you know. I also wanted to spend some time, not only looking forward, but also kind of reflecting on the season. I just mentioned Arneal a little bit. I thought let's chat about how the season has gone, what's really worked well, what maybe needs some tweaking as we head into this postseason run in just a brief moment. But before we do, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Gametime. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, anything you want. Obviously, you're trying to go to a whiteout game. It's going to be tough to get tickets, but Game Time can help you. And their all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And of course, you can even see panoramic seat views so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. And for any of you who have ever had the luxury and pleasure of experiencing the Winnipeg whiteout, you know that as that panoramic view comes across, you will see nothing but a sea of white. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Obviously, we are just wrapping up here with some final thoughts ahead of, what's really one of the biggest playoff series and playoff runs in recent Winnipeg history. The Jets have the revenge tour route. This is going to be a big throwback for a lot of teams that have, quite frankly, hurt the Jets over the years. And again, a lot of this assumes that Winnipeg advances over the next couple of rounds. I feel good about this team going through, even injured. This Jets team is playing some, slam banging hockey, so I don't stress about that too much. In the meantime, though, right before the start of game one here, I just thought it would be nice to take a moment to think about the season, right? It's been, 82 games that kind of felt like they flew by a bit. And I think the Jets have really shown a level of maturity and improvement this year that does kind of push towards that 5 to 10% better that Arneal preached throughout the offseason. Now, not everything he's done I entirely agree with. The usage of Logan Stanley obviously has some question marks for me. There have been some lineup choices and arrangements and combos where I'm still kind of like a little mixed on a few of them. But on the whole, Arneal has managed to push this team forward from where Bonus left off. And I think that is a really good thing. If nothing else, even just looking at the special teams hires has been a tremendous success. I think Dean Chenoweth has quietly really improved this team's PK to where we're kind of above league average. We're more towards the top part of top 15 than the bottom half of the league. So even if it's like 13th or 14th ranked, that is a huge change from being like 28th, 29th, 30th, or lower. And at times, the Jets' PK was worse than that. So, a huge props to Dean Chenoweth. Obviously, I mean, does anyone even need to talk about Davis Payne? He's been just like one of the greatest single hires the Jets have ever made. He has been a miracle worker on the power play. I think he's having a little more trouble recently without Ehlers and Velarde, just because internally we don't have replacements. But I don't think that that's a reflection on his skill as a coach. He has very clearly coached one of the league's very best and most dangerous power plays. Had they not all gotten hurt recently, we'd probably still be ranked number one. So yeah, elite power play, pretty good PK. Arneal has got the 5v5 game starting to play at a really strong level. Basically borderline elite, because the defense is elite. Offensively, we're getting there. I think overall, I'll call this team, a pretty elite 5v5 team. At worst, you're like top 10 in a lot of categories. At best, you're really starting to push towards top 5/top 3. So really impressed. And what I think really stands out about the Jets is that they're built for a variety of scenarios, right? They don't excel at necessarily one thing and one thing only. It's like a broad range of categories where the Jets are good. They create a good mixture of chances. They suppress a lot of really high and medium danger opportunities. They don't have many glaring weaknesses that show up on a routine basis. There are some areas like, maybe the third D pairing and stuff where maybe the Jets would like to have a little more stability. But overall, this team has really had a good run this year, and it's led to multiple trophies: a President's Trophy. We've got another Jennings Trophy. Hellebuck's about to get another Vezina. Very possibly getting the Hart Trophy. He just barely missed out on, leading all four goalie statistical categories, literally just barely. So, expecting him to sweep some awards. He is also right now, I believe, the betting favorite for the Conn Smythe. Last I saw, that may have changed. I last looked a couple of days ago, but if he does have what I think he's going to do in this playoff run, I think we're finally going to see the narrative around Hellebuck change. We know that his regular seasons have been extraordinary. He has put together one of the best 3 consecutive regular seasons runs that we've ever seen, right? This has been tremendous. It's put the Jets in a fantastic position. And this year, he really set his own standards even higher. So this season feels magical in many ways. And I've really started to look at the Jets as a team of destiny. It kind of started falling in place when the Jets were able to beat the Caps. They did it without Velarde. And after that, things just started to feel like Winnipeg was on a crash course for not only the number 1 seed in the whole league, but also just, feeling like this team was going to be the one that finally broke the curse, right? The Jets haven't had a cup run in a while. They haven't really looked like a real playoff team in several seasons. This year, they finally do. This team looks dangerous. They look defensively mature. They look like they're ready for a real run. And so all I can say is I'm excited about this. Again, I said I was doing some little dances in the kitchen today. I have some nervous energy, but I'm excited. I think that that's my biggest takeaway. I'm ready for the playoffs. This weekend's going to be awesome. The whiteout's going to be absolutely rocking, and I think the fans are ready. They've been selling out multiple games straight now, like 8 or 9 games straight at last I saw, and so that has to feel so good for the team, so good for the fan base. And I think with how hard it's been to get playoff tickets for this first game, it's going to be sellouts at the barn every single game. So get hyped, Winnipeg. Jets hockey and the playoffs are finally here. They kick off tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. my time. We will see you over the weekend for hopefully a fantastic opening start to the series. But for tonight's show, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow, so see you then. We'll see you probably for a brief short over the weekend, but a more thorough recap and preview for Game 2 on Monday. But like I said, that's all the time that we've got for today. Thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.